Hi. The film I will be talking about today is No Looking Back. This film was written and directed by Edward Burns and was released in 1998. This film also stars Ed Burns, Lauren Holly, Connie Britton, Jon Bon Jovi, and Blythe Danner. This is one of those films that I came across on one of those random cable networks many years ago. I don't ever remember it being released in the theaters. It was a low budget film, and it's one of those undiscovered masterpieces that get lost in the shuffle. And when you see the film, you easily can understand why. It's a hard film to know how to sell. It's not a boy loses girl, boy gets girl, or a girl in a small town looking for Prince Charming and then finds out she's really happy in the small town after she makes it to the big city and goes home. This is truly a day in the life of a woman who's caught in a rut. And that woman is played magnificently by Lauren Holly. She plays the main character, Claudia, who is not somebody who has lofty dreams of I want to live in Manhattan and be the head of an advertising agency or anything like that. She simply wants a life that's just different from the one she has in any way, shape, or form. And she is surrounded by people who have either found contentment in this world or have surrendered to this world. And she's in a relationship with a character played by Jon Bon Jovi, Michael, who is as good a guy as you can find. He loves her. He puts her on a pedestal. He doesn't have a wandering eye. He's not degrading. She knows he's as good as you find in a community like her, really a community anywhere. He's as loyal and honest, and there's nothing wrong there. Yet at the same time, she's unhappy. And she feels guilty for being unhappy. She's got no real reason to be compared to those around her. She's got more going for her than they do. She's got a job as a waitress. She's got Michael, who treats her great and, is dependable and would be a great father and husband, and she knows that. But that's not what she's looking for. And in the beginning of the film, we see Ed Burns' character, Charlie, who is this shifty kind of guy. He's come back into town, and we realize he was one of those that was a big deal in high school, and he peaked in high school. Since then, he's somebody who's bounced around, comes in and out of their lives, and that they've all kind of lost touch with. And he shows back up and kind of rekindles the flame that used to exist between he and the Lauren Holly character, Claudia. We find that they dated in high school. They get word that he's back in town. Michael goes to tell him, look, we're together now. Stay away. You didn't treat her great. I treated her good, and I stayed. He's not going to accept that. And he drops by the diner where she works, and he gives voice to a lot of the things that it seems as though he knows she's feeling. And he's like, whatever happened to that girl that I used to know in high school who I used to call you Claudia because your head was in the clouds and you were a dreamer. And she tells him straight up, I grew up, that's what happened. And life is what it is. And we find out through that conversation that years ago when they were in high school, he got her pregnant. And she had had an abortion. He never checked on her afterwards. He just kind of left town. And now he's wanting sort of this forgiveness and hero's welcome that he's back, thinking that they can just kind of push that to the side and move on with their relationship. And she lets him know that that's not going to be a possibility, that she's happy with Michael. And he knows, because he knows her, that if there's any part of the old girl that he knew, she's not happy with that. She was never happy with that town. The only thing that really kept her going as a teenager was that belief that we all have when we're young, that we're going to get out. And now she's kind of having to let that dream slowly die in front of her. And he's constantly popping up, reminding her of that. And he starts to look a little bit better to her because of that. He's not part of her daily life anymore. He's something new. He's offering excitement. He seems to be speaking her language of, we can get out of here together. There's something better for both of us. And while initially she's reticent, she's like, I know what you are. You're a con man. I'm not buying it. A desperate person starts to listen with a willing ear. And he slowly kind of starts bringing her to him. And we see the relationship with Michael start to dissolve. And there's a great scene where they're going to the local pub. They're on their way there to have dinner and watch the ball game and things of that nature. And on the way there, she said, why don't we just go into the city tonight? Let's go see some new faces, new people. And he says, are you kidding? I can't afford to go into the city. You can't do that. And she kind of shrugs. She's like, just be nice to see some new faces and something different. And he said, listen, why don't we go to my mother's? We could get a meal there. And she looks at him and says, I'm not going to your mother's. And he's, why? She says, what's going to happen is you and your brothers will watch football and your sisters trap me and pressure me about when we're going to get married. And then he looks at her and says, yeah, and what do you tell them? And she's like, don't start. She said, the same thing I tell you. And he's like, yeah, which is complete BS. And they start to fight, and he goes, I don't know what you expect from me. I don't want to be an old man by the time I'm married. I want a family. I want kids. I want that with you. I don't know why it's so baffling to you that I'm starting to wonder when this is going to happen. We've been together long enough. What's holding you back? And she basically screams at him, I don't want to be a housewife. That's what's holding me back. And he looks at her and says, who says you would have to be? And then she says the great line, you tell me, what else would I be? And he says, I don't know. And she said, that's exactly my point. Neither do I. And it's at that point that we kind of learn the reason she's so reticent about anything. As long as she doesn't have kids, as long as she's not married, there's still that possibility of getting out. But the minute she walks down the aisle, puts the ring on, and starts having kids, it's over. So she's clinging to dear life to this idea that she can get out. And there's another scene where she's in the diner and it's kind of dead, and she's filing her nails. No customers to deal with. And as she's doing it, she turns and looks, and the lady far down, who's also a waitress who works with her, who's probably 20, 30 years older than her, is also filing her nails. And we see that Claudia just got a glimpse into her future if things don't change. She just kind of throws the nail file and is disgusted with herself. And what's interesting about this character is she has a father, Claudia, who abandoned them recently. Left her. The mother has not recovered from it. She's in denial, thinking he's going to come back. Her sister doesn't even want to speak the father's name. She says, to me, he's not even my father anymore. And we find in a conversation between Claudia and Michael, she's sympathetic to the father's plight. And she said, I hate him for what he's done to my mother, but I grew up in that household, so I kind of can understand his side. And he looks at her baffled, and he's like, how could you understand him? Do you see what it's doing? She said he tried to tell her. She wouldn't listen. He wasn't happy. And Michael looks at her, and I never forgot this part. He said, so what? Who says you have to be happy all the time? And we see that doesn't resonate with her. She doesn't have that same ethos that Michael does. She thinks happiness is something worth pursuing, something worth stepping out for, that sometimes it's okay to be selfish for your own self-preservation. And Michael doesn't see it that way. Big deal. You got a wife, you got kids, you got responsibilities, time to grow up and move on and put those silly dreams to the side. Whereas for Claudia, those silly dreams are the only thing that really make life worth living. And as the film goes on, toward the very end, it looks as though she's going to rekindle her romance with Charlie, and they're planning to go off together. And they're going to chase the dreams that they dreamed about chasing years ago. And they have a night together. And then in the next scene, we see it is very awkward between the two of them. And then she gets home and she's confronted by Michael, and he basically confronts her, and she's honest with him and lets him know where she's been and who she's been with. he's completely disgusted with her because, as he says to her, I can find a woman that will treat me with respect, that won't make me look like an idiot. He knows he's a good quality guy and that there's a lot of women out there that would be glad to have him. And she says, you know, the last thing I wanted to do was hurt you, but at that point, it's too late. And so the next scene, she's with her mother and her sister, and her mother seems at this point to have come to terms with the fact that the dad's not coming back. And she says to her daughter, you were always much more like him than you were me. And she kind of looks at her mother like, oh yeah, that's a great compliment. And she said, no, it's kind of what made me fall in love with him. He was so different from everyone around here. Always wanted a little bit more, and that was intriguing. And we see that that was kind of what he left to Claudia, that desire to break out of the monotony of life in this gray, dreary, depressing kind of one-horse town, so to speak. And so she then goes and talks to Charlie, where he's working at the time, and lets him know that they're not going to be going off together. And his immediate reaction is, so you're going to stay here and marry Michael? And she says, no. We realize she's going off, but not with either one of them. She's just getting out. Not that she's going to go to Hollywood and try to become a big movie star. Not that she's going to go, you know, as I said earlier, to Manhattan and work for an advertising agency. This is somebody that doesn't even seem to have a college education. But she is getting out. She's going somewhere. She doesn't really seem to know where. But it seemed as though him coming back made her realize how miserable she'd been and how used she'd gotten to being miserable. And that if she didn't do it now, she never would. And as I said earlier, this film was written by Ed Burns. And he is such a great writer because he adheres to the philosophy of write what you know. His father was a cop in New York. He comes from this kind of area. He has an ear for that blue-collar dialogue so well. And before this, he had done a film, Brothers McMullen, which won Best Picture at the Sundance Film Festival. And he's kind of like Woody Allen. He develops these scripts and has the kind of actors and people that he works with a lot of the same people. So Connie Britton was also in Brothers McMullen, and other characters kind of pop up in a lot of his movies that you get used to. He seems to know what he wants, and he knows how to capture it on screen. And it's unfortunate that this film didn't hit simply because it wasn't a rom-com. This is more than that. And it's about how we all accept things in a weird way without even knowing it sometimes. And even though I would not in any way call this a feel-good movie, it is a movie that does make you feel good in the sense that it reminds us that if we're willing to take the chance and to not settle, doesn't mean that there is something better on the horizon, but there is something on the horizon. And it might be worth looking into. And that's what the main character in this film decides to do. And I think a lot of us would also be better off if we decided to do that. So until next time, thank you.